this episode, we're going to take a look at a variety of things I saw at NAB 2018, and I'd like your votes on which of them you would be most interested in seeing reviews on. Since we cover mostly sound on this channel, we're going to start with microphones and recorders. Now, first of all, on the microphone front, there was a new company, Deity, which is a spin-off of Aperture, which you've probably heard of before if you've watched our channel. And Deity is going to be making some microphones for filmmaking. They already have a shotgun microphone, which was originally released under the Aperture brand as the Deity microphone. Now the new company is called Deity. They have already improved that original microphone by doing some additional tweaks to it to improve its self-noise performance. And they also had a couple of other mics. We have an episode over here where we look into some of those details. Next up was a very small shotgun microphone from the company Sanken. Sanken is renowned in the professional sound world for filmmaking as a very quality producer of microphones. And this one is really nice because it's so small, it's very lightweight. Now, it is a little on the expensive side for those who are just self-funding their projects. However, it's much less expensive than a lot of other professional microphones. It's coming in at about $800 US. My brother and I were able to go to the Sanken booth and get a listen of the new microphone. It sounds very good on the show floor. It's hard to tell because the show floor is so noisy, but I'd like to get one in for review if you guys are interested. Next up on the audio recorder front, Zoom had a couple of different things. One that we already know about is the Zoom H1N, and I'm already working on a review of that one. Whether you like it or not, that's coming in the next week or two. And in addition to that, one thing that was very exciting for those that are kind of moving up into the prosumer grade is the Zoom F8N, the next generation of their Zoom F8 professional grade recorder. This one looks pretty nice. It fixes a couple of problems that I had with the original Zoom F8 and makes it a very compelling option. So if you're interested in that, leave a vote below. Audio Limited has a new all-digital wireless system. Now, for those of you not familiar with them, Audio Limited is a company that's been producing wireless microphone systems for a long time. In fact, some of their first wireless products were used in 2001: A Space Odyssey. So they've been doing it for a long time. Until recently, they have not been available in the United States. They are now, and they have their new digital system. Now, this one's going to be much more expensive than many of us can afford, but for my professional work, I need to get into a more reliable wireless system, and so I have my eye on this one. The review that I do on this one will probably be more along the lines of what's different when you move up into a professional grade wireless system versus the more consumer and prosumer grade system. So watch for that one. Now moving over to lighting, Aperture had a variety of new announcements, some of them very exciting. The first one is the COB120D Mark II. This is their single point light source with daylight color balance, and they've done a couple of things to improve it. Number one, it is 30% brighter. Number two, they've taken the external AC adapter and integrated that into the control box, so you have fewer pieces. It used to be 3 pieces, a head, a control box, and an AC adapter. Now it's just 2 pieces with the head and the control box / AC adapter, which are 1 unit. So that looks pretty interesting. It also looks like the new connections are very robust. So they're stepping up their game in terms of that overall quality, and they've also redesigned the yoke. And that, in fact, was one of the things that I had concerns about on the original COBs. They've never failed me, but it looks like the new ones are much nicer. They actually grip on both sides, and they have a more robust handle. Next up is their Light Dome 2. This is a big softbox. There are a couple of really nice new features on this. First of all, there's a gel holder that will hold gels up near the light source, so it'll be much easier to actually gel the lights and still shoot it through the softbox. And then in addition to that, it comes with an egg crate grid that goes on the front so you can control the spill of the light. And probably the headline feature is a new design for the actual dome itself, which makes it much easier to set up and break down using this sort of quick release system. They also introduced a variety of new light modifiers for the COB series of lights. First of all, a new Fresnel lens that doesn't appear to have any sort of light leaks, which is a really nice step forward. Looks like a much more solid piece of gear, and it's made out of metal as opposed to the composite material from the previous generation. Also, we have barn doors, we have a new grid, and we also have a Lico light attachment. This turns the COB into something very much like the types of lights you've seen on stages in the past, so it's used more in theater rather than film, but it can also be used in film. It is for cutting the light very, very hard and very, very precisely, and also putting gobos in between so you can project something that takes the shape of whatever the gobo has. So for example, Aperture had one there that actually spelled out aperture, and you just slide that in to the Lico light, and the light shines through and shows that pattern on whatever you're aiming at. The next thing was actually not so much a product announcement. In fact, they were very clear to say it's not a product announcement, but it's a concept that they're exploring right now and working on a design for. And that is an RGB LED light. That is to say, a light that can display all the colors of the spectrum. And in addition to that, what made it most interesting was it had what is called a separate color picker, which is an instrument you can actually point at a light source and it will get a reading of the color of that light source and then transmit that to their RGB light, and that RGB light will reproduce that color. That's a very, very cool concept where you could do a lot of different things. In addition to that, they said that they're also working on the ability to do temporal recordings. What that means in practical terms is you could actually maybe point that color picker at a fire, and then the light would reproduce the flashing of a fire in addition to its color, or at a television, and it could reproduce the flicker of a television. If they can pull this off, I think this is probably the most innovative thing that I saw at NAB in terms of lighting and sound. I hope they can do it. It looks really, really interesting. So go ahead and leave your vote down below. Make sure you're subscribed, and if you'd like to be notified each time a new video comes out, go ahead and click on that bell icon. Talk to you again soon. For those of you that stuck around, a couple bonus items here. First of all, the Blackmagic Design Pocket Cinema camera obviously made a big splash. Most of you have probably heard of it. It's a new 4K, very small form factor camera that comes in at, I believe, $1,300 US. It has a micro 4/3 size sensor, and it looks like a pretty interesting improvement over the previous generation. It's using a much larger sensor. It is a bigger body. It is still relatively small, and it uses a micro 4/3 active mount for lenses. So yeah, it looks like they've addressed, again, some of the major issues with the first generation. Much bigger battery, so it's going to last up to an hour now. So it's not perfect, but I think it would be a really nice camera for operating on gimbals or other situations where you need to keep things small. Next up from Atomos, the Ninja 5, a small 5-inch monitor and recorder that fits on the camera. It has an HDMI input, and it has an HDR screen, so it looks like a really interesting little monitor. I'd love to see one with an SDI input so I can use it with my other cameras like my Blackmagic Design Ursa Mini Pro. But if you're interested, go ahead and leave a vote down below for this one. Atomos has also announced ProRes RAW support, so in their high-end recorders, namely the Sumo and the Shogun Inferno, you can now record to ProRes RAW. So if your camera can feed a raw signal out and Atomos can read that particular raw signal, it can then record it into ProRes RAW, which means that it can play back without any transcoding in post. That's kind of a big deal. And then finally, a company that I wouldn't normally visit, but I was really just kind of curious because in their name they have supercomputing. It's a company called Silverdraft Supercomputing. They make supercomputers. Now, I can't afford any of these, and probably most of us that watch this channel can't. But it was really neat to go see what's happening in the world of supercomputing. They're much smaller than they used to be. Their smallest model is a VR Mini, and this has 2 NVIDIA GTX 1080 cards in it, in addition to, I don't remember how many processor cores, but it's really focused on thermal design, very high performance. We were able to demo it with the new Vive Pro VR headset, which actually at this point hadn't been released yet. It was really exciting. Again, not something I'll probably review because again, I can't afford it, but it was interesting to see what's happening in the world of supercomputers.